Lesson 9.4, Graphing Sine and Cosine Functions. Our essential question: how do you explore characteristics, stretch and shrink, translate and reflect graphs of sine and cosine functions? Standard 9.4, number 2, Graphing Sine Functions. Now that we have discussed all of the characteristics of cosine and its 5 key points, let's go ahead and graph some functions. So our first cosine function, we need to identify a. A is the number in the front, so a is a 1/2. And we need to identify b. B is the number connected to the x. B is 2 pi. After we identify a and b, we're first supposed to identify our amplitude and our period. So amplitude is the equation, the absolute value of a, which means I have the absolute value of 1/2, which is 1/2. My amplitude is 1/2, which means from my middle line, I'm only going to go 1/2 high. So that means my y-axis is appropriately labeled. So that is my amplitude. Let's go ahead and look at period. Period is asking you how long do you need to have your x-axis before it's going to start repeating again. Your period is the equation 2 pi all over the absolute value of b, which is 2 pi. So we've got 2 pi all over the absolute value of, you said b was 2 pi. The absolute value of 2 pi is 2 pi. So this is 2 pi over 2 pi, which simplifies down to 1. So my period is going to be 1 long before it starts repeating. None of these are a value of 1. So that means that my x-axis is going to have to be relabeled with not pi values, but with number values. Now what numbers we use? It says that we're going to only be repeating after a value of 1. So let's go ahead and count by halves, because then I could fit at least a couple of repeats in here and a few additional values. Now that I have scaled off my x-axis and I know my y-axis is appropriate, we need our 5 key points. And these all key points are the formulas we found on the previous page. So key point number 1 is our x-intercept, and it has an equation. It actually has 2 x-intercepts, so we need 2 equations. So here are the equations for the 2 x-intercepts. Both require b, which is 2 pi. So using our formula, x-intercept number 1, x-intercept number 2. So we just found our 2 x-intercepts. Next I need to find, I have 2 maxes. So point number 3 is a max, and it's a formula. And it requires a, which is 1/2. So there's max number 1, and then we have 2 maxes. It is also a formula. It requires a and b. So I just found both of my maxes. My 5th and final point is my min. And he is also a formula. This formula requires b and a. And then there's my min. So now that I have all 5 values, we're going to go ahead and graph them. So my x-intercept is 1/4 0. The other x-intercept is 3/4 0. So I know my period is last frame from 0 to 1. So this is how often it's going to repeat. So we need to make sure our x-intercepts are repeated throughout the rest of the x-axis. So it looks like it's occurring at every quarter. So we're going to go through and have it occur at every quarter. So now my x-intercepts are all there. Now I need my max. My max is at 0, 1/2, and then 1, 1/2. Seems like every whole value ends up having a max at 1/2. So I need to go through and make sure every whole value has a max at 1/2. My min is at 1/2, negative 1/2. So it looks like every other half is going to have a negative 1/2 min. And then there is my cosine. I'm just going to connect them. And there's our cosine graph. Now the last part of this question asks us to describe the transformation. Your a and your b tells you your transformation. So since a is 1/2, a is always our vertical stretch or shrink. So this is going to actually be a vertical shrink because that number is smaller than 1. its vertical shrink by a factor of 1/2. The B always tells us our horizontal stretch or shrink, so this is going to be a horizontal, and it's actually going to be a horizontal shrink. Why is it a horizontal shrink? Because you need to take the reciprocal of this. So this is actually by a factor of 1/2 pi. Our next problem, we're trying to graph cosine of 2x. So first we need to identify my A. My A is 1. And identify my B. My B is 2. To be able to graph, the first thing you need to do is you need to find your amplitude and your period. Amplitude is the equation, the absolute value of A. A is 1. So I'm taking the absolute value of 1, which is 1. So that means from my midline that I need to be able to go at least 1 high, so I am. My y-axis is scaled appropriately. I need to find my period because that will tell me how long does the x-axis need to be before it starts repeating. He's also a formula. He's 2 pi over the absolute value of b. b is 2. So this is 2 pi all over the absolute value of 2. Absolute value of 2 is 2, so this is 2 pi all over 2, which simplifies down to pi. So my period is pi. I have length for pi, and it's going to repeat every pi. So I know that I have plenty of room. So here is my x and y appropriately scaled. Now I just need to find my 5 key points. Because this is cosine, I know my 5 key points has 2 x-intercepts. So we're going to find the 2 x-intercepts first. And then we'll go ahead and find our 2 maxes. And then we will lastly find our 1 min. So our x-intercepts require b's. B is 2. X-intercept number 1. X-intercept number 2. So here are my 2 x-intercepts. My max requires A. So there's max 1. My second max requires both A and B. So here are my 2 maxes. Last I need to find my min. Min requires both A and B. So now that I found all 5 of my values, let's go ahead and graph them. So pi fourth 0 is right here. 3 pi fourth 0 is right here. Looks like I am going to be having an x-intercept at every one of the fourths. So we're going to go ahead and plot at all the fourths. I have a max at 0, 1. And I have a max at pi 1. And I have a min at pi halves negative 1. So my period lasted pi, so it went from 0 to pi. So this is what my repeat should look like. That means every value of pi, I should have the same visual. It should go 1, 0, negative 1, 0, 1, 0, negative 1, 0, 1, 0, negative 1. And it should do that also going the other direction. So if you were to connect these, you have your cosine function. Now the last part of the problem asks us to describe the transformation. So our A and our B always describes our transformation for us. Our A is 1. A is always going to be your vertical stretch or your shrink. Because it's 1, nothing new is happening. So there is no vertical transformation. There is no vertical stretch or shrink. B is for horizontal, and so we do have a horizontal. Now is this going to be a stretch or shrink? This is actually going to end up being a shrink. Why is it a shrink? Because horizontals are reciprocals. So this is a horizontal shrink by a factor of, this is actually a factor of 1/2 because you're supposed to take the reciprocal of it. Our next problem, we're being asked to graph 1/3 cosine of 1/2 x. So first we have to identify our A. A is the 1/3 and our B. B is a 1/2. First we have to check to see if our x and y axis are scaled appropriately, and to do that we need to find our amplitude and our period. Both are formulas. Amplitude is the absolute value of A. A is 1/3. So we're looking at the absolute value of 1/3, which is 1/3. So I know that my y needs to be able to count up to at least 1/3 because from the middle, it's going to go up by 1/3. So let's go ahead and actually scale these by thirds so I can see where that 1/3 is going to live. Now I need to see about my x-axis. How long does the x-axis need to be before it starts repeating? That's what your period is. Period is 2 pi all over the absolute value of b. My b is a 1/2. So this is 2 pi all over the absolute value of 1/2, which is 2 pi divided by 1/2, which ends up getting you 4 pi's. So my period is 4 pi, which means my x-axis is not counting appropriately. I don't get to 4 pi. So we are going to need to rescale our x-axis so it counts appropriately. And based on how long we are, we're going to go ahead and count by pi's. So I know I can at least fit an entire 4 pi period before it starts repeating again. Now we just need to find our 5 key points. And cosine always has 2 x-intercepts, both by formulas. So both of them require b, so let's go ahead and plug in the value of b, and b is 1/2. X-intercept 1, x-intercept 2. So I just found my 2 x-intercepts. Cosine also has 2 maxes, so the next 2 points we need to find are the 2 maxes. They are also formulas. The first max requires a. There's max number 1. The second max is also a formula, and it requires both a and b. So here are my maxes. The last of the 5 points is my min, and he is also a formula. And this is my min. Now we just need to make sure that we go ahead and we plot all the points. So first our x-intercepts. We're at pi 0 and 3 pi 0. So it looks at every odd pi is going to end up being a repeated x-intercept. So there's all my x-intercepts. My max is at 0, 1/3. My other max is at 4 pi 1/3. My min is at 2 pi negative 1/3. So from my period is 4 pi, which means from 0 to 4 pi is going to be what my repeat looks like. And I need to make sure that's repeated on the other side, and we keep going. So I know that I was at 0, and then 1, and then I need it to be at negative 1/3, 0, and then I need a positive 1/3. So connecting these, here is my cosine function. Remember, cosine is even, which meant this side should look identical to this side, and they do. They're symmetric across this y-axis. Now I need to go ahead and tell us our transformations. Your a, which is a 1/3, is telling you your vertical stretch or shrink. Because the number is smaller than 1, we know we are a shrink. So this is a vertical shrink by a factor of 1/3. Our b's are always telling us about our horizontals, and because this number needs to be reciprocaled, we're going to end up getting a 2, which means this is going to be a horizontal stretch by a factor of, take the reciprocal of that, we get 2, which is why it's a stretch. There are 3 problems left on the page for independent practice. Please do these 3 on your own.